we are in historic Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania, in the Brandywine Valley, just west of Philadelphia and north of Wilmington, Delaware. And why are we here? Well, we're here to go to the Brandywine River Museum. This is a historic old mill on the Brandywine Creek that was reserved back in the 1970s and done pretty well. And why are we here? To see the Andrew Wyeth studio tour, which we're going to take today. So why don't you come along as we take a tour of this amazing museum.
About Andrew. He was born in July of 1917. He was the fifth child of N.C. Wyeth, and N.C. Wyeth's house is right over that hill there, so that's where he grew up. And he did not go to school. He was sickly as a child, so N.C. kept him at home and allowed him to roam the countryside. And that's really how he became enmeshed and intrigued with the Chadds Ford area. And N.C. provided a very rich fantasy life for his children. He was an illustrator, so Andrew was exposed to all of N.C.'s illustrations and all the famous illustrators at the time. N.C. introduced them to classical music and classic literature, and so he really had quite a broad education, in addition to they had private tutors for him and some of the other children. But around the age of 15, N.C. decided to give him some formal art training. He showed some potential. He was sketching, doing a lot of sketching. So N.C. took him into the studio and started the formal training. And then in 1937, Andrew had a one-man, sold-out watercolor exhibit up at the Macbeth Galleries up in New York. He repeated that 2 years later, in 1939. So he's quickly becoming a premier watercolorist. And he's doing them here and then up in Maine. And he would do them in very bright blues, very pretty colors. But in 1945, October the 19th, there was a tragic accident. N.C. Wyeth was driving his car about a mile from here. The car still on train tracks, and the train collided with the car, and he was immediately killed. He was about 63, Andrew was about 28, and so from that point on, you'll see his palette changes. Andrew's palette becomes a little more somber. See some of the ochres and the deep browns. So just as an effect, he said, what has started in me cannot go in vain. So he ends up changing his palette a little bit differently. They moved into the house. They'd just been married, and he used this as a residence and also a studio. He painted here in the studio from 1940. The family did move out in 1960-61. They purchased an old mill down in Brandywine. But he came back here every day and painted in the studio. He would drive his car back here. He would let it covered with foliage, and then, because he did not like visitors, he didn't want to be intruded upon. And if that didn't work, that's why he put the sign on the door, do not disturb. The last summer that he painted here was 2008. Because that summer he would have gone up to Maine like he did every summer, and he paints up in that Port Clyde area, and he died in January of 2009. We're going to go inside. So this is the kitchen. This was the addition. They put it on in 1950s, early 50s. When the curators opened it up to the public, they wanted to replicate it to make it look like that. So the appliances are not the original. They would have been the 1950s appliances. This is an original table, and Betsy would have acquired it probably from an antique dealer. This is where they would sit. Andrew would have a fire going, they would sit here, and you probably would put a painting over the fireplace here. And this is the painting that I was referring to. So here, this is called Monday Morning. And this is a tempera. Talk about tempera in the studio. But he has a laundry basket here. And in Monday mornings in the Pennsylvania Dutch custom, you did your laundry. And so this was Betsy's laundry basket here. Apparently, she left it out overnight, and that's why there's snow in the bottom of the basket. So, these both are reproductions. That's a reproduction. It's called Winter Bees. So Andrew, as I said, this would roam the countryside, the Chatsworth countryside. He would bring his sketchbook with him, his palette. He would start to sketch something that would just spark his imagination, and he saw this beehive. He loved the color, he loved the shape of it, so he started to sketch it. And then he would come back and finish his sketches and finish his paintings in the studio. So, and this is Betsy's hat and coat over here. This was an entryway. They would come in here into the kitchen. And we'll start with, here's Frolic Weymouth. Here's George Weymouth. He's dressed as Truman Capote for a Halloween party. But, and that was really important to the Wyeths. They really would have Halloween parties up at NC Studio. These are his watercolor blocks. Andrew's blocks that he would use. And this, I'll point out, this is a poster that Jamie did, son Jamie did, was for Ted Kennedy's primary election when he ran against Jimmy Carter in 1980. And then Ted Kennedy writes, "To my winter sleighing partner, the best in America, Ted Kennedy." And then Jamie signs it over to his father, who he actually gave it to Andrew. When he came here to Chatsworth, Andrew's about 6 years old, and Andrew just
adored him.
yes, and became almost like a brother figure to him. So we'll see a lot of, actually, we will see a lot of photos of Peter Hurd here. Peter Hurd told him egg tempera one week, but he also told him to fence. So that was a hobby or occupation that Andrew liked to do and took more lessons in that. Andrew loved movies. He was a movie buff. His family in Nancy would take him to the movies frequently. And here is one of his famous characters that he liked would have been Errol Flynn, that swashbuckling, handsome character. So we'll see canisters. He bought Errol Flynn's movies. We'll see some of those in the library. And this is his sister Anne. Anne was 2 years older than Andrew. This is a friend from Maine. His name is Ralph Klein, and he used him as a model. He had a World War I uniform, and so we painted him up in Maine called the Patriot. This is a model that Andrew used frequently up in Maine. His name is Walt Anderson. And I'll just show you this card. He did a lot of pictures of Walt as the lobsterman in different poses, different times of the day. They were very good friends. I mean, if you know, growing up friends, palling around together, getting into trouble together. So yeah, they're very good friends. This is a friend of his. He's a painter. Andrew's friend, Stephen Etnier from Maine. Here's Andrew out on the lawn with one of his dogs. I think that's Rattler. And here's Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda did a documentary of Andrew Wyeth, The World of Andrew Wyeth. So Fonda was here doing a narration. I just want to talk about this here. This is a collage of Andrew with Siri Erickson. And I'm going to back up a little. You're probably all familiar with Christina's World. He did this, he painted Christina up in Cushing, Maine for about 30 years. Betsy introduced them. And when Christina died in the end of the 1960s, then he was looking for a model, and he met the Erickson family. So then he started to paint Siri. This would be an example of one of his paintings. It's not in the galleries right now, but that would be Siri. Yeah. So we're going to go into the hallway. It's very narrow, and we can span out. I'll just point some things And then we're going to head into the library. Of the Wyeth McCoy. So that's Anne Wyeth with her daughter Anna. This is John McCoy. Anne married. This is one of their dogs. I think that's Sacco. And then here's Andrew with Rudolph Serkin. So he would have been the pianist that would go down to the Academy of Music. And that would be Anne's son Dennis over in the corner. Yeah. The other thing, and you'll see when you come down this way, on this wall over here is a cast of a medal. Andrew received the Congressional Gold Medal from Ronald Reagan in 1988, and the relief on the cast of the medal is a picture of Andrew, and that was done by son Jamie. So besides Winslow Homer, Albrecht Dürer was very influential on Andrew. His works were, Dürer was probably the originator of the dry brush, and that was a form of watercolor, and Andrew really tried to perfect that. And the one artist that Andrew was a contemporary of Andrew's, and they were friends, was Edward Hopper. Edward Hopper and Andrew were on jewelry exhibitions at the galleries up in New York, and it was also Joe Hopper that taught Betsy Wyeth how to categorize and give inventory to all their works. So she was Andrew's business manager, she was his model, she was his muse, she was his critic. I mean, she really let Andrew paint, and then Betsy did everything else. And then on this shelf over here, there are some shadow boxes. As we talked before, he was very to do with the war. So here would be two shadow boxes that he purchased. This is Napoleon, and then this is Lord Nelson. But Andrew created his own self-portrait using his own X-ray. And he took that X-ray and made it into a skeleton. And he called it Dr. Sin. Dr. Sin was a character in novels in the 1920s. And so Betsy asked the artist here, his name is Shepard Payne, to create a shadow box with Dr. Sin in there. So here it is. Dr. Sin is in a navy coat, sitting in a cabin, looking out the window there. But that's what that references to, his self-portrait.
When you say the war, is that in World War One?
Yeah, for him. Yeah, for him, because he was born in 1917.
Right.
And then he became friends with Karl Kerner, who was in World War I in Germany. And the two of them would talk and regale about stories. So,
Now, there's the soldiers up here, all that's World
Yes.
War I uniform.
and that is just a snapshot of the military miniatures that we're going to see in the living room. Wanted to show you this. This was done here. This is a reproduction, but he called it KAS, K-A-S. And you see where actually a backdrop, of course, would be that wardrobe over there. That's the Dutch word for it. So he would have done that. The pediatrician gave Andrew and Betsy that as a gift, that wardrobe. And then probably in the galleries you saw Willard Snowden. He was like a merchant marine. He came here and knocked on the door. Andrew gave him some odd jobs to do, and he stayed here for years. And so the two of them would sit and philosophize, and this was done here in the studio. And then this one, I'll just show you, this was Helga. Helga would have been painted right outside this cupboard here.
Wow.
And was Helga family or? Helga was the nurse for Karl Kerner. Karl Kerner's farm was about a mile up the road here, and Andrew painted there. And I guess I've repeated this again, how friendly the two of them were, and they gave him access to their farm. He could go anywhere and paint. So when he was painting up there, Helga was taking care of Karl Kerner. He was diagnosed with leukemia.
Did he cast miniatures, or did he just buy pre-made?
He bought them pre-made.
Okay.
So yeah, some of them are tin, some of them are elastolid that they would have purchased. But most of them are metal. Yeah. So he started to sketch, and this is what he would sketch. He would sketch bombs bursting and the soldiers coming up over the hills, and then that's when NC saw his talent. So Anne Carolyn would have taught Jamie his art skills, but then Jamie created this little alcove here so that he could paint right outside of his father's studio. And then he has his own studio now. So if you do get a chance, or when you do, you can come up behind the easel and look directly into the mirror. This is his style, it's a technique. He uses it, Andrew uses it, kind of reverse perspective. It's a way that you look at your painting through a mirror and you're able to critique it. And as Jamie said, he did John F. Kennedy, but he did it in 1967. So he wasn't able to use Kennedy as a model, so he used his brothers, Robert and Kennedy.
And that's the one that's in the White House, right? Did he do the White House one?
No, it did not become the official, no. Remember, NC purchased this in 1925, and then he renovated it. So he would have put in these windows. This is the north-facing window. That's the light that artists value the most. He would have blocked in this window over here so there wouldn't be any competing light.
Oh, okay.
And then he never used artificial light. This he would just use to check on his work, but he always painted in the regular light. And this is how it looked when he died. It's all this speckled look. The children wanted it to remain exactly as it was when he was here. The only thing that had to be fixed was the ceiling because it was drooping and they had to put a mesh up there. But I wanted to talk about tempera a little bit here. And you'll see sketches on the wall there and sketches on the floors. He did these probably either watercolor or he might have done a little bit of pencil or a pen. But these would be like thoughts for Andrew. He would start sketching and the thought would come down on paper. Not necessarily that he would use them. They'd be on the floor, he would step on them, he would put them in here in the cabinets. But then when he went to paint, this would all kind of come up into his imagination. So Andrew used tempera. He made his own tempera. It's a medium that you would use eggs. And he got them from a local Wawa here. Crack open the egg, use the egg yolk. You let the egg yolk drip into the distilled water. And then he would take his powdered pigments and make the tempera. He would get his powdered pigments probably from Peter Hurd, and when Peter was helping him with this, he also ordered powdered pigments. There's samples along the windowsill over there. And
So is Wawa a big sponsor of the museum? They should be.
So tempera painting is a type of medium that takes a lot of time. As you can see, you're mixing it. Some of the artists, Thomas Hart Benton revived it here in America. And Andrew really liked it. One reason was he was a watercolorist, and watercolor for him was very facile. I mean, he could just paint watercolors, but tempera slowed him down. It gives you a discipline because you're modeling, he's made his own temperas. But then when you start with the tempera, it can't be too oily, it can't be too greasy, you've got to constantly mix it. It's going to dry and then you can't reuse it, you have to make it again, so it's a labor of love. And then when you're doing tempera, you have to do it on a masonite panel or a hard panel. You have to coat the panel with a gesso. So he would have coated this, layers of a gesso. At one point he did find pre-made masonite panels that had gesso on them. And then you build up your layers with your medium, so layer upon layer, very small brush strokes. And he would have used many different kinds of brushes. Some are samples over here, even a paintbrush. He would have used the back of the paintbrush to kind of get like a hatching effect. So it was just something for him, a discipline that he really enjoyed. As Jamie said, it kind of was a distillation for him.
What did he mix the tempera in with the egg?
Here. Yeah, this is his palette. This is actually his original palette. And in this painting, you probably saw it up in the gallery, raccoon. This one right here, again, you're going to get that reverse perspective if you look through the mirror. If you see the masonite in there, he probably had to use a palette knife in order to get the depth that he wanted in the stone. And then you saw, I guess you read the text about the raccoon. They were in a mill down on the river. Andrew was walking by, saw them, he started to paint them. He became very kindly towards little Jack, the one in the white, it kind of highlights him in the bright white. And then he has a chain around him to kind of get that fixture that they were captive. They were really kept kind of emaciated. When you first paint it, it dries quickly and it's soluble. Later on, it's insoluble and you can actually go back and rework it. It produces a matte finish, very different than an oil finish. Another reason they like it. And they say if you are an oil painter, you like Beethoven, you like that loud music, but if you're a tempera painter, you like Bach because it's nice and soft, and that's what tempera artists use.
But you still have to do it very fast because it dries.
Right,
So
right.
you have to have it clearly in your mind and then go,
Yes.
it's very finicky.
Right, but then you would come back to it because it would take him, maybe only 2 or 3 tempera works came out of the studio. It would take them maybe a year plus to finish a tempera painting. And he would intersperse it with watercolors. So.
So he did the watercolors in between?
Exactly. Exactly, yeah. Yeah, because he would do that while he's roaming the countryside. I mean, he would just pull down the hatchback from his Jeep and sit on the hatchback and then just paint wherever he was. So, a couple of photos. I'll point out there's Betsy over on that's her photo over on the wall there. And then on the wall between the 2 windows, the top photo is NC. The bottom one is, the middle one is Howard Pyle. That would have been NC's teacher of illustration. And then the bottom one is Peter Hurd, his brother-in-law. Became good friends with.
Get a chance to travel through the Brandywine Valley on historic Route 1, you'll come across Chadds Ford and the Brandywine River Museum. Now take a look. So I want to thank you for watching this episode of Queer for Travel as we took a look at the Andrew Wyeth studio at the Brandywine River Museum of Art here in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania, in historic Brandywine Valley. This is in the southeastern part of Pennsylvania, just west of Philadelphia and just north of Wilmington, Delaware. I hope you enjoyed our video, and if you like what you saw, please give us a thumbs up and also follow us here on Queer for Travel. Hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified of future adventures that we'll be taking. There'll be trips. Until next time, bye-bye now.